Angelina. I am so excited to have you on the Voices of Stack interview. I'm excited to share with everyone your journey into clinical trials and clinical research management. So, my first question for you is what compelled you to learn about this world?
When I worked in oncology at the University of Pennsylvania about 3 years ago. I worked the front desk there, and I really got a feel for how the clinic flowed and how infusion flowed. And I saw like over 50 providers on that floor. There was there were times when clinical research coordinators or nurses would come on the floor and they would ask the patients if they would be interested in participating in a study. And I always thought, oh, that's different. That's interesting. I wonder what that's about. And I never really dove into it. So it's always been on my agenda, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. So that's why I decided to take this class with you guys.
That's so wonderful that at your prior role, you got to actually observe, patients being recruited for clinical research and clinical trials, and it piqued your curiosity, where you said, "I really want to learn more about that." So, in learning clinical research and clinical trials, um, I'm sure there are portions that were difficult. What was the hardest part about going through the clinical research, clinical trial management program?
I guess just like organizing myself, it's just more internal because I was coming from nursing school and I took a break and then I had to get into this mindset of like, oh, I'm back in school again to just kind of making a list for myself, making sure that I read my chapters and wrote things down according to like how I learn. Um, and and I guess just getting job ready. So I started early on. So that was just like another thing that I had on my shoulders that it was like in the back of my mind, but also like it was constantly on my mind. So I was just always applying to jobs, and that was kind of like a heavy load on me. Um, but it worked out in the end.
Was there ever a time when you were going through the program, besides the logistics, because you decided to tackle both learning and also finding a job simultaneously? Was there ever a time when you were in the program where you encountered really difficult material, um, and you were like, you know what, this is really hard. I don't know if I'm going to continue with this.
I never felt like I wouldn't stop the program because
Mhm.
I honestly didn't think it was that difficult. But I will say the industry project was very difficult.
Tell me more about the
Oh
industry
yeah.
project, because like that's, taking what you're learning in the classroom and kind of putting it into real world context.
Yeah,
Wh-
so the
yeah, tell me more
industry
about that.
project was basically looking at a protocol for the first time. I've never looked at a protocol. I had no idea, how to even begin with that. But eventually, like it worked out pretty good because I worked again with the leaders provided, and like they guided me on as to where I should look and how I should proceed. And they liked the fact that I submitted early to get feedback.
Okay, so this ended up being a really positive experience, while of course extraordinarily frustrating, in the
Yeah,
beginning. It
yeah,
sounds
it
like it
was.
was it was a really good learning experience for you that hopefully um, helped you prepare for your job, and frankly, I'm
Yeah.
guessing also helped with job interviews.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the key thing that they really wanted to hear is that you're willing to learn, and doing this program is just a fact that you're trying to learn. This is just a very basic piece of learning clinical research. So having done that just proves that like you're willing to learn and put the work in.
That's wonderful. That's absolutely true. The fact that you're doing this program is an indication of your willingness and aptitude to learn. Absolutely. Let's talk about the professional acceleration part of the program, the soft skills part. Um, why was that important to you? And what were some of your key learnings?
Yeah, I think the most important part of learning professional acceleration is just learning how to network and get your name
Mhm.
out there. I mean, it's just like the most basic thing, because we are doing this program to get a job. So
Mhm.
just having someone look at our resume and and say, like, your resume shouldn't be 4 pages long. It should be a page or a page and a half. It's just something simple, and a simple tweak you can do that could increase your chances of more employers looking at your resume
Mhm.
and having a chance for an interview. So, yeah, I think having that piece is important for a lot of people.
Okay. So let's talk about, we started to talk a little bit about your, how you started so early applying to jobs, which I think is awesome. But let's dig more into your job hunt process. What tips do you have for people who are transitioning, as you did, into clinical research and clinical trials? What tips do you have for them as they're doing the transition and looking for their first gig?
My biggest tip is to make sure you have a LinkedIn account and to add recruiters.
Did you not have a
Add
LinkedIn?
recruiters.
Did you not have a LinkedIn
Oh, I
profile
always had
before?
a LinkedIn. I'm very big on LinkedIn, and
Okay,
I will message recruiters, and the worst thing that can happen is that they don't message you back.
that's right.
Hey, I'm Angelina. I'm really interested in learning about this position. Hey, I'd like to learn about the company. Just putting yourself out there is probably the most important thing, and it's probably the best way to get in with a company. Maybe it won't be right away, but they don't forget about you.
Okay, these last two questions I ask everyone, and they're very broad. So the first one is, what advice would you give to your younger self? And you get to choose whoever your younger self is. So, whatever time period that is. But what advice would you give to your younger self um, based on where you are now?
So when I was younger, I used to think about like wasting time. Like I worked while I was in college, and I felt like I was wasting time. I
Going to,
felt like I wasn't finishing school fast enough, and
oh,
I wasn't getting on the in the job market fast enough, and nothing was fast enough for me.
got it. And you wish you had kind of slowed down a little bit and been like okay with where you are. Mm, I think that's great advice. It's so important, especially as you're trying to move forward and you're trying to progress. And anyone watching this video is thinking about what's next, especially probably in the clinical trial and clinical research world. And there's certainly this impatience to get to where you want to be, but you have to
Yeah,
balance it with, like you said, being um, kind and gentle to yourself, and also, recognizing that wherever you are right now is where you're meant to be, and you're still moving, in the direction, but you don't have to be so hard on yourself. I like that. That's great advice. My
thank
last
you.
question is for someone who is at an inflection point professionally, just as you were, right? When you decided that nursing school wasn't for you and you were interested in exploring clinical research and clinical trials, for someone who's at an inflection point, what advice do you have for them to like navigate this inflection successfully?
I would say reach out to people that you know are in similar situations. So or in similar positions. So reach out to your nurses, reach out to your clinical research coordinators, get their intake, get their input on those positions, ask them questions. I actually did that. I messaged a clinical research coordinator and a clinical research nurse, and I told her about the dilemma I was having about possibly leaving nursing school and going into clinical research. And they both have said positive things from both ends, but essentially it was up to me. Um, so really, weighing out the pros and cons, writing things out, taking your time thinking about it, maybe not so much rushing into it, like really research, really think about it, talk to people in the field. That's probably the most important thing you could do.
That's so smart that you reached out to people who are, in the fields that you're interested in transitioning into or transitioning out of, to get their perspective, and being really thoughtful and deliberate. I'm not surprised, knowing what I know about you, that you were so methodical and that you were so good at building your network to do that. That's great advice.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelina. It was really cool to hear your story and to hear your tips. I know that people listening and thinking about how they can, get into clinical research and clinical trials will most certainly, I'm sure, heed your advice, especially the ambitious one you did, which is starting your job hunt like at the beginning of the program, but then you had it before you graduated. So look, there's proof right there. So thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your perspective, Angelina.
Thank you.